It's really exciting. We have a new book coming to D&D Beyond. That's Obojima. What is kind of the vibe of this new book that's showing up on D&D
Yeah,
Beyond?
so we're calling it leisure fantasy, right? Kind of exploring this whimsical world in maybe not the most violent way that you're used to in a standard D&D game, right? More focusing on like the characters you meet and kind of their weird quirks and the strange occurrences that occur while traveling around.
And so this isn't only a campaign setting, but there are plenty of player options as well. We've got subclasses, we've got magic items, we've got different species. Can you run me through there's three new species, correct? Can you tell me what those are?
Yeah, so we've got the Dara, which are these kind of nomadic, strange, alien-esque creatures that popped into existence, 300 years ago, canonically in the world. They're born out of a hole in the ground next to a tree, and they kind of get all of this information through their ancestor who leaves kind of this parting glyph on the tree before they pass. And so it's almost like this rebirth, kind of reincarnation feeling where you're the descendant of a past Dara who's passed on some information, and it's all about this kind of exploration and this fun feeling you get, kind of playing into the leisure fantasy of wanting to learn more about the world.
Yeah.
And then we've got the Nakadama, which are our take on frogs and kind of this once a ancient warring faction of frog kingdom kind of turned into more storytellers and tall tale tellers that just like to explore the world and pick up odd jobs. And then lastly, we have our take on elves, which aren't the long-lived creatures we're used to, but instead kind of like a subhuman race where like an elder spirit long ago in some generation, blessed some of the humans. And so now elves are born to humans. Every 20 parents might have an elven child, and they just have some gifts that are connected to the spirit realm and the spirits that exist within Obojima.
How do you capture kind of a leisurely adventure? Because that is something that does exist in several genres
Yeah,
of like you have this very interesting setting, this interesting world, and you can't, it's more about the journey than anything.
I think a big part of it, and a lot of this came in advice throughout the book, but a big part of it is focusing on resolution with your antagonists and other characters outside of combat. And so rather than seeing a sleeping dragon in front of a cave and needing to get past the dragon by fighting it, you might question the dragon. Why is it feeling so lethargic in that moment? And going into how you come to a conclusion outside of conflict. And so by looking at it that way, oftentimes you're not leading, in a standard D&D game, you lead your party to one combat after another. And instead, you're leading them through puzzles and questions and connections through the NPCs they meet and the monsters that they might turn into friends later down the line. And so it's heavily focused on that. That being said, not to say it doesn't come to blows all the time, but I think it doesn't, when you do come to blows, it certainly doesn't always lead in death. That's for sure.
I have to ask because again, there are a lot of player options, a lot of player things to find. Well, there are 180 potions.
Yeah, so we focused on a new potion brewing system. There's 135 ingredients that you can find out in the world through exploration, through salvaging old objects or digging up mushrooms. And then each one of them has like a whimsy, a combat, or utility score, these three numbers associated with it. And by combining three ingredients, it randomly generates one of the 180 potions on the list. And
Oh,
so
fun.
rather, like I think the standard D&D game would be like, I need to find a recipe to brew this. It's actually the exact opposite. You're making the recipe and you're seeing what it brews.
We have 11 subclasses here.
Mhm.
What are the 11 subclasses? Can you kind of give me the really quick pitch on each of
Yeah,
them and like what
I'll
kind of
break them
needs do they
down.
serve, who they're for? Yeah, it's a lot. That's a lot of player
It is a
options.
lot. Yeah, it took a while to kind of fit them all through the pipeline of Obojima. Jumping right off the bat, we have the barbarian, who's the belly brewer, which ties really nicely into our potions chat, right? So the belly brewer combines by consuming different ingredients and brews the potion inside their stomach rather than through a cauldron and some alchemical kits. And so they have this, in addition to have some fun magical effects that happen when they induce their rage, they also have this huge wide variety of potion effects that they can get later down the line. And they actually get to kind of make their own choice potions from the list of that 180 ingredients that they get to call their own and can activate on a pretty regular basis. Then we have the origami mage, which is our take on a wizard, right? And they're enchanting this paper craft, which they send out as construct familiars to kind of guard and protect their allies. And they're, almost like giving a little familiar companion to the fighter. And then they're able to cast spells and give boons and bonuses to that fighter from a distance as long as one of their origami constructs is with them. We also have the fighter subclass, which is our spirit-fused fighter. And so this is kind of the concept. Spirits are a huge portion of Obojima. They kind of exist in the day-to-day life as merchants, but also as these kind of like elder beings, and they kind of they run from pest to god almost in Obojima. And so the concept of the spirit-fused fighter is what happens if a dying spirit kind of passes through you and kind of leaves some of their essence. And so with that, you're able to channel that essence into found objects. Obojima is filled with trinkets and weird things. And so now you're able to kind of enchant those in a minor way on the daily basis to kind of produce strange effects. Kind of similar to Battlemaster, but a little more magic heavy. The Waxwork Rogue is another one that's pretty interesting. The Courier Brigade is a big part of Obojima, and that's the postal service of the island. And so the Waxwork Rogue are rogues that enchant candles to produce magical effects. A big part of it, they kind of stemmed from them being able to seal with their signet rings these packages to protect them, and it's kind of blown out from there to be able to produce, timed magical effects through lighting candles or throwing a candle into a room and producing these unique effects. Very utility-based, and it's a lot of fun. Then we jump into the Paladin subclass, which is our river-based Paladin. And they're kind of taking these tenets of the river that are both dangerous when it's, these rushing waters, and also tranquil and calm when it's these, sacred pools. And so their duality is very like battle control and also healing. And so they kind of have this push and pull on either side of the river. We also have the Sheep Dragon Monk, or the Shepherd Monk. Sheep dragons are these curious creatures that live all throughout Obojima that are these long serpentine, like sheep-furred dragons that kind of graze in the fields. And so these shepherds have grown to take care of them and have adopted some of their properties, kind of these speedy, air-like qualities. And they're also great at keeping allies safe and kind of moving around the battlefield, just like a monk normally would do, but this time with a little more flair. The College of Mask Bard. So this is a bard based on kind of like old theater masks, right? Utilizing theater masks throughout their performance. And they're enchanting these masks to kind of produce these unique properties, taking on some of the maybe some of the enchantments that are connected to the mask itself. So if the demonic mask or the old man might give them properties based on those characters in theater. And so in addition to them being able to change kind of their play style on based on the mask they're wearing, later they can even share some of those masks with their allies. Then in addition to that, we've also got the Dawn Petal Druid, which utilizes this Dawn Blossom tree, this kind of sacred tree throughout Obojima, and is able to call the petals to aid them. And so they're utilizing these huge swarms of petals to form companions and shields and walls. And so in addition to them kind of having this summoning type feature where they can enchant petals to make animalistic creatures that follow them, they're very protective, they're very battlefield control-y, and a lot of fun. So our warlock has a unique connection to the spirits of Obojima, right? So Obojima lacks ancient gods and elder beings, and so instead the warlock makes a unique pact with a spirit of any size, right? Something small or big, and they enchant a lantern that they keep on them at all times. The spirit acts as the illuminating aura that produced from their lantern. And this is where the warlock gets to play with the light effects that most people ignore in D&D, right? The dim light, the bright light. So based off of creatures, whether they're in your dim light or the bright light, you can produce different effects. Sometimes healing allies that are in your bright light and damaging enemies in the dim light, or the vice versa. And so it makes this unique experience where the warlock is really, focusing on where they are in the battle and where their lantern is shedding light. A lot of fun, and certainly a unique play style when it comes to warlocks.
And then we have a new sorcerer as
We
well.
do have a new sorcerer. So this is also a pretty unique play style when it comes to sorcerers. We went with the Oni bloodline sorcerer, and this is playing on the idea of the latent magic that's kind of stuck inside a sorcerer is keeping the Oni at bay. And so as you expend sorcery points and you're kind of losing some of this magic inside of you, the Oni starts to produce its features. And so the less sorcery points you have, the more Oni-like you become, which, has some boons and benefits, but also in Obojima makes you a little more demonic and a little more monstrous. And so you kind of have to play with that, especially in a leisure fantasy setting when you're walking around looking like an ancient demonic Oni creature. And so, yeah, it's playing with you want to be losing sorcery points, and now there's kind of a benefit, but with some negatives at the same time.
And then we have a ranger.
Yeah, the ranger's also kind of playing around with some boons and some negatives. There's the corruption, which is ailing the island of Obojima, this kind of dark manifestation that's creeping up from the island, the ocean shore. And the corrupted ranger is someone who's unfortunately become sick from connection with the corruption. And so the manifestations of the corruption are actually the ailments that are being produced from its connection to the ranger. So as they become more sick, they kind of get these strange abilities that it kind of plays out where maybe you might lose some of your vision, but in return get certain senses. Or you might have this kind of graying cough that constantly is ailing you, but in the same time you can kind of pull the breath from an ally or an enemy. And so it's this weird juxtaposition of you're kind of dying, but you're also the most powerful you've ever been. It's certainly the darkest of the characters I think Obojima has to offer.
Now, I'm not going to make you tell me all of this stuff that is in this book because there is quite a bit, but there are also 20 feats, there's 50 spells, there's 60 monsters, and there's 48 magical items. Can you kind of give me like the brief rundown of what you can expect from some of these feats and these magic items that are new, and even the monsters?
Yeah, so a lot of the feats are connected to the factions that exist throughout Obojima, right? The Courier Brigade, there's a lot of 8 different witch factions, and the sword schools and things like that. Aha, which is, architects and artificers and things like that. They exist within Obojima, and so a lot of the feats kind of connect to the world. In fact, all throughout the spells and the magic items, we're kind of bolstering and connecting them to the world as best we can. When it comes to magic items, we tend to lay into the unique aspects of Obojima, which is this kind of what we call first age tech, but what everyone else would call like 80s technology. The first age left all of these artifacts, which are VHS tapes and old abandoned buildings and K-trucks and Vespa scooters lying throughout the island. And so there's kind of this juxtaposition of a fantasy farmer who drives around on a moped and drinks potions all day, right? So a lot of the magic items play into that side of Obojima. And then when it comes to spells, we try to go as weird as possible, right? We have a lot of whimsical and interesting spells like Vegetable Blade, where you summon a vegetable from the ground, and although it's quite potent as a weapon, you can also take bites of it to heal yourself. And so we have a lot of, unique, quirky spells that I think add to the game quite a bit, as well as a lot of cantrips that kind of play into some of the action economy that's not utilized, like bonus actions or reactions. We try to fill in some spells to give more options in those regards.
What types of monsters can we expect in this setting?
Weird ones, that's for sure. Spirits are quite important, and so we have a lot of different spirits that are found all throughout Obojima. We do a couple of unique takes on creatures that you're familiar with, like harpies that are chain smoking and wear World War I fighter pilot outfits and things like that. But then we also have creatures like the mossling, which are little moss balls with eyes that like to follow you around and play tricks on you. Although Obojima tends to lend to low-level adventure with little quirky things here and there, we also have these kind of giant elder beasts that fly and exist throughout the island, like the Sky King who's on the front of the book, this giant skeletal shark that kind of guards and protects the island, or the Hunter, which is a ginormous stork that perches on the mountain of Obojima.
And given that there are so many, there's quite a few monsters. This is about exploration and kind of in a casual way. There's a lot of maps as well, correct?
Yeah, there's a handful of maps connected. In the back of the book, we have 3 different adventures. Each one is like a short little exploration of an area or environment within Obojima, and each one has maps connected to that for you to utilize and explore. Some of them being underwater, in like an abandoned city that's sunken under the ocean, or the Wandering Forest, which is the forest that uproots itself and shifts around the island and then resettles. And so we have a handful of maps that kind of detail those areas as well as an overhead map that shows the island in itself.
Why was it important to have that technology aspect mixed into this? And does that carry over into some of the magic items that people are going to run into?
Yes, it does. So for us, we wanted a setting that felt uniquely Obojima, and a big part of that is kind of playing on this quirky combination of modern times and fantasy, this overlap of a fantastical world on top of the modern world. And so we kind of took it and twisted it and made it our own. And so because of that, you find this modern technology all throughout Obojima. And I think it makes a pretty unique play style where the players are fully aware of what these objects are, and I think it just leads to the question is how they got there, and how have they become integrated into society in such unique ways. Seeing a vending machine stocked full of potions, it really fills you with this sense of wonder, which is exactly what we want Obojima to be doing.
If you had to convince someone to like play this, how would you pitch this in like 60 seconds or less? You must be used to that from just having to do a Kickstarter video.
Yeah, I have. I would say, do you want a kind of twist on what you're normally playing? Like all the camaraderie turned up to 11 and then thrown into this fantastical world that's reminiscent of some of your favorite things from your childhood, and kind of seen in a unique way that you've never maybe experienced. And then I think in addition to that, the art does the rest of the selling for me. After the next 30 seconds, I would just go, look at the artwork from this book. Because I think that's almost just as important to sell this book, is to show the environment we've designed with the art. And really, that's what's important. It's just as much as visual as it is, I guess, theater.